There are more stories to tell about Katrina than, and I've told at least 2 or 3 of them here over the years. It's also very interesting. You can't travel anywhere in the world without running into somebody from Louisiana. So I come here today and I find 20 of my colleagues. So bear with me that I didn't expect to see you here. So if I get a few facts off after 8 years. We've been here about 3 or 4 days talking about the future, really. We've been talking about risk, and we've been talking about what we're doing going forward. So I've already made one presentation about integrated water management and things that we're going to be doing in the future. So kind of step back here a bit and tell you how we began to get there is the point of this talk this afternoon. And no, there's no slides, just another, I mean, tremendous. There's presentations decided by all of us, but I think we can tell this story with our eyes closed. Because in the world of Louisiana, there's before Katrina and after Katrina. That's how we measure time. And so where I'm going to start is before Katrina. I'm going to start on August 29, 2005. As a Category 3 storm, over 100-mile-an-hour winds headed into the Gulf into New Orleans. And quite honestly, it didn't hit us directly, it hit us on its side. But as we woke up the next morning and the storm was subsiding, the levees broke, which was a truly unusual occurrence, hadn't occurred before in any other storm, and began to inundate the city. It flooded 80% of New Orleans. Water filled the city for up to 5 weeks. 100,000 people lost their homes, property, everything. I have one of my colleagues here from Seattle that came down and did pets, and so we lost pets as well, and we had to create a whole other infrastructure for how to deal with pets. The city was dewatered over those 5 weeks by a 100-year-old pumping system that had never failed in the past. Thank the Lord we had it. Or we probably wouldn't be having the ability to stand here yet today and talk to you because we were able to do that dewatering in those 5 weeks and begin the process of rebuilding. We are where we are today. That storm left over 1,100 dead, countless injured, and the population of New Orleans was displaced to all 50 states. So we began again out of this experience. So I began to jot some notes about what were the lessons learned in that, to start again from nothing. There's not one of myself, my family, or any of my colleagues that did not lose their home, everything they owned, and had to begin and rebuild again out of that. And we did it all while we were working on the recovery. I have happened to not be working in the city of New Orleans at the time. I was the Deputy Secretary of Transportation at the time, and I was a little busy coordinating evacuations and the like. And oh, by the way, when that storm receded, the I-10 twin spans that had connected the interstate highway in the eastern part of the country had fallen into the lake. And we had to figure out how to take care of that as well. So what did we learn? Okay. We learned a lot. And we've built on it, and we've now had subsequent events to test it. But from my personal perspective, the first thing I learned is that the vehicle evacuation plan that hadn't worked the year before worked this time because we had the time. It was a plan that required us to start evacuation in southern Louisiana with 50 hours out. In the Katrina event, we had that time. So we were able to use that and get people out. In subsequent events, we had to make adjustments. But sheltering in place didn't. Shelter in place is not a prudent policy. We need to get people out because it overwhelms the services and it takes us away from recovery because we're in rescue and it just overwhelms you. We learned that hurricane planning at every level is critical, from federal, state, and local, because we all had to get around the table and do that. But more importantly, what we learned is that you need to test the plan and test it often. And that is occurring as we speak. I just was reminded that the mayor of New Orleans right now is conducting his hurricane evacuation and emergency preparedness drill today. because hurricane season started June 1st. So we now have 6 months of attention in our community, and we want to be prepared. So we're testing that plan this very day. Next thing we learned is make communication plans for everyone. Okay, it's a top-down orientation. I want to thank my friends at the state. I saw a new communication strategy last week. The state's plan is called getaplan.org. It's on the website, and every individual can make their own plan. And we communicate it every year. But this is the first time we communicated on variable message signs along the highway. So we found another way to tell people to get ready and get a plan and be ready. And the biggest thing I think we all learned is that please listen to your local leadership. When we tell you to go, go. When we tell you how to leave, leave. And the people that suffered most are those who didn't. And it wasn't all because they didn't have the communications and the like, but because they weren't accustomed to it. I've heard 10 times since we've been here this week. I think it was Melbourne, that said they evacuated people 7 times in as many days, and they got tired of going. And all I could offer them as a suggestion is, please tell them to go. Whether it's a fire, whether it's a drought, in that, because you can't predict. Every event is different, and you just have to deal with it as it comes. So the biggest thing then becomes response requires flexibility. I mean, no matter what you plan, that's not what you're going to do. Okay. So the first one, as I said, we had no plan for pet evacuation. Who thought of it? I mean, that we would have this major thing that we had to deal with. And my friend from Seattle came down and volunteered and tells wonderful stories about the things that volunteers did. But now we have a pet evacuation plan as an outgrowth of that. Special needs evacuation and sheltering is critical. I mean, most of the nursing homes were required to have plans. They didn't. So we end up in a situation where we were moving people from Superdome to the airport and out. I mean, personally, my 101-year-old grandmother was evacuated from a nursing home to the airport and on to Atlanta and died there because she was in that nursing home for 5 days. So we all have those stories, and they're all very personal. Cell phones don't work. Text messages do. I mean, and we began to learn that we needed more capacity in the communications arena and begin to build on that. Critical thing for New Orleans during that inundation, water, sewer, gone. I mean, you are helpless in that environment. Luckily, because we are located on both banks of a river, our West Bank water treatment plant worked fine. And we were able to supply water to all the first responders and the Corps of Engineers, and produced over 100,000 gallons of potable water a day during the time we also dewater in the city. So you can't help yourself until the cavalry arrives. In recovery, time is needed to plan, prioritize, and direct. If anybody thinks you're going to get over this, my friends from New York, good luck. Welcome to the club. You're in for the long haul. Okay. Roles of agencies are different, and you have to understand them and know who to access and how to access them. The Corps of Engineers in our world, and FEMA, the Department of Transportation, state, all have different roles to play, and if you don't know exactly how to engage them, you can be lost, and you can be lost in a hurry. And I want to thank our friends in the congressional delegation, C.T. Bradley, out there in Senator Landrieu's office, for that guidance and helping us find all of these people and all of the things that they did and bring them to the fore. I can tell you some of my best friends are from FEMA now. I meet with them every 2 weeks to this day on our recovery. As I said, engagement is for the long haul, and you just have to be ready. I mean, any of my colleagues will tell you there's something called Katrina fatigue. They're tired of hearing it from us, but what I can tell you is that unless you're there for the long haul and can sit through all you have to sit through to make sure you get everything you're supposed to get and your community gets all the resources that it needs to begin to rebuild, don't get up and don't settle, okay? Because it's the only way that you get to to do that. The other kind of long-term engagement is the things that we've gotten here from the Dutch dialogues, where people begin to communicate with us, and we begin to have the opportunity to get new ideas and begin to put them in our rebuilding. For me, it became pretty critical to get in-house capacity to have long-term sustainability. I have a unique situation. I was not the manager of the recovery after Katrina. I became the manager under the new administration. When I came there, I found that most of my support was consultant support, who gave me no ability to learn from what they were doing and the ability to sustain it because I knew it was going to happen again. So I transitioned the majority of my staff to in-house staff. And so now I have much more capacity to undertake these operations, and these people know these rules, these regulations, these people, these processes, and they have the ability to move through them much better, much quickly, to the point that the priority projects that the mayor gave me, when I took office, I had 600 that somebody had thought of and didn't have any money for. I could afford about 2/3 of them. And so we prioritized them in our own quick planning process, and we are now 70% complete on those plans and in those projects, and we intend to be complete on the first, what was originally 130, now 295 projects at the end of 2014. We'll be in continuing FEMA work, but we will be in that original prioritization will be done next year. Do what government does best. And what that means is put back public services and facilities first to give people a reason to come back. I mean, in our community, people have been coming back in spurts. I personally believe it's got a lot to do with school cycles because they all move somewhere, they've got their kids in school, or they've got a job, and they're looking for these key periods of when to come back. And now we are the fastest growing city in America. We have, the last census just produced that we have 388,000 people, which is 2/3 of our pre-Katrina population is now returned. And I think it's based on the fact that the mayor prioritized police, fire stations, community centers, swimming pools, those schools, the things that people needed. It's critical infrastructure. And we continue to work on roads and sewer and water facilities and the like to put those in place. And how do we do it? We put a place-based strategy together. We couldn't put our resources everywhere. So we carved out about 10 major areas of the city that we called our place-based community areas, and that's where we planted our flag. We just broke ground on one right before I left, where we were putting a new supermarket, and that, but we've done all the road improvements and the sewer improvements and the like there. We've started a community center in the lower Ninth Ward and a fire station and health clinic, and these are the things that are helping people move back. But that place-based strategy is also based on something that my colleague just talked about. New ABFEs, the monster in the room, the base flood elevation that set by FEMA, which determine flood insurance and flood mapping. In New Orleans, the story for the most part, except for those areas outside the flood protection, are fairly good. But in some of our surrounding communities, it's culture shock. It's now forcing people to make very hard choices about where they're going to be able to live and work. Also, we've benefited greatly from the folks at CPRA who are here in the Coastal Restoration and Protection Plan that's begun to really deal with the coast and begin to put some protective measures in place. For us, it became pretty clear that basically we couldn't do anything until we were safe and secure first. And for us, that meant the hurricane reduction strategy that was under the direction of Corps of Engineers. This was a $14 billion infrastructure plan to put over 200 miles of levees, dikes, permanent pumps, and the like around the city to create 100-year flood protection. And for us, we believe 100-year flood protection is a good start. We know we got another conversation to have for where we go from there. But in addition, on top of that, we began the work of water, sewer, drainage, road, and utility improvements to support that. And it is good to see New York engaged so heavily in the electric utility issue. We have a private utility, and we wonder, I mean, we'll survive. That pumping station I told you about is run on my power, okay? I don't depend on theirs. But people will return when they feel safe, and those things can help you get there quickly. That new system I just talked about, main thing, it worked. And how do we know it worked? We had another storm last year, a Category 1, Hurricane Isaac, which, as I said, every storm is different. To your 300-mile versus 1,000-mile example, this one went a little, probably if this storm track had been the Katrina storm track, we would have had even more damage, but this became a rain event and a utility event because the storm stayed over the city 50 hours. It rained and wind for 50 hours. And so basically what came out of that is that we had the similar storm surge to Katrina, but we had the hurricane risk reduction system in place. And we have now we have this storm surge barrier out in our Mississippi River Gulf outlet, which is almost 3 miles long, 26 feet high when it's in place. And when that storm surge reached 13.6 feet, just hit up against it and went back into the Gulf, onto the lake in the Gulf. So we were very thankful to have it. It ensures, for me, our ability to ensure people that we are safe and secure, that they can now reinvest. And so people, businesses, and the economy continues to return as a result of those kind of investments in New Orleans. So we are now engaged in mitigation activities. And the most significant one is that the power plant I told you about that runs our sewer water and drainage system that was designed over 100 years ago, and I happen to have seen some of the drawings that were done by Thomas Edison. We're now trying to upgrade, and we're doing a complete upgrade on that plant, and we're using hazardous mitigation funds from the FEMA that are generated by our other work, and we'll invest almost $235 million in restoring that power plant because it is the heart and soul of the community because it runs sewer water and drainage in the city that is 6 feet below sea level. So as we do all of that work, what we are becoming is as the mayor likes to say, we're not building back the city what it was. We're building the city we want to become. We're building better facilities. We're hardening them. We're using green infrastructure in every instance where we can. We're elevating where we need to. We're doing it all. And we are also actively engaged in networks like this to learn so we can continue to improve on the things that we can do in New Orleans because we've been there 300 years. Our 300th anniversary is in 2018. We expect you all to see you all there. And we'll be there, and we'll be there another 300 years, so thank you.